everybody. Today we're doing a special taping, and I'm here with Mike McDonald from the Gallup, where we've been honored to receive the 2021 Don Clifton Strengths-Based Culture Award for our culture, which I think we take very personally and have a strong commitment. And we know we've tried as hard as we can to keep the culture strong, even during the pandemic. I want to talk a little bit about our partnership with them, and then have Mike talk a little bit about that as well. Is that we, as the executive committee, took our first step initially in doing the Clifton assessments, really in a way to transition with the idea of us becoming, in a sense, more coaches than bosses, which is what I've always thought we should be. And so we started out with the notion of thinking about, let's understand our own strengths and how it works, and then get it out to every employee. And so I think from that, we rolled it out, and everyone in the company either has or will have the opportunity to take the test. And we think it's really great. So Mike, why don't you want to talk a little bit about how we've worked together and what it's been like from your side?
Yeah, I would love to, Stu. So thanks everyone for letting me join the conversation. And let me start off with a sincere congratulations. We, as you can imagine, at Gallup revere Don Clifton, revere what the award means. And it's an interesting statement of priority, purpose, and performance. And I think that's why PTC is so deserving. And, I think as we think about contemporary, circumstances and celebration, and we take it back to Gallup and PTC, Stu, I think we've been hanging out together since like 2017 at that point. And we were having a lot of meaningful conversations around engagement. But I would say that Stu, when you took your eyes or put your eyes on this performance construct of OKRs, that's where strengths really seem to catch fire and make so much sense. When we think about not just performance outcomes, but performance development, I have a deep appreciation for what PTC is doing about the frequency of revisiting goals. How do we stretch and grow as we attain those goals? But how does that move your culture at PTC forward? And strengths are just our natural capacity to succeed in our very unique and customized ways. And so I really appreciate just the evolution of our relationship, that you can see where it really has produced in authenticity and reality, the very reasons why PTC is the recipient of the 2021 Don Clifton Award, because you've integrated it into such meaningful features and facets of who PTC is as an organization.
And we as a group, I think the reason why we gravitated to that is the boss to coach paradigm is more about discussion and transparency. And I mean, that goes perfectly with what we were doing with the objectives and key results, and that the notion was that everyone talked with their managers as well with their teams and functions to actually be connected, right? And you needed to have conversations as such. And so it wasn't like a top-down sort of approach in terms of command and control. It's about discussion and transparency. And at the end of the day, it's the honest conversations. And when you look at the boss, the coach training, it's really about conversations. And there's different conversations that everyone utilizes. But the point really, and it isn't like you have to say, I need to have a 2-hour conversation with every one of my people every week. That wasn't the point. And actually, in the discussions with Mike, it was like, frankly, sometimes texts are good enough, depending on the weeks. It's the connection on what people need, and to do things in the right way in terms of right being what's needed at that time, and be able to understand the coach rather than boss. And therefore, it really becomes, it's the discussion rather than telling someone what to do.
Yeah. Yeah. Sue, one of the things I've always, from the first day we met, and you and Martin have been really central to this focus, but one PTC. and you've never wavered in this commitment to one PTC. So while PTC has experienced exponential growth around the planet, how do you clone your culture and create systems and networks that make sure that integrity of that cultural feel is never lost? And I love what you're describing, because those conversations are the conduit for your own culture, right? The frequency, the content of the discussion is all reflective of this ongoing commitment to one PTC. So it's exciting because PTC is going to have even more growth, right? It's increasing at an increasing rate. And the confidence you can have that you'll never lose your culture is a big statement. So many organizations lose their way. And I think that maybe even more, that's the fulfillment of one PTC, Stu. I don't know if I'll let you weigh in on whether you think that's true or not, but perhaps Strengths really unifies the language around the support of what does it mean to be one PTC.
And it's the conversation. It's also, like we've always said, you can't make a cat a dog, and you can't. So the notion being is that it's like you should, if you know the strengths of the people on your team and play to those, that's a lot better than harping on what's wrong. Mm-hmm. Not that we all don't want to improve on in strengths. Like, actually, from my perspective, those strengths that are lower down the rung doesn't mean you can't utilize them. It's just not first on your list of what your go-tos. Mm-hmm. So part of coaching is sort of saying, what other these aren't your go-tos, but maybe think about them once in a while. Mm-hmm. Or utilize who's on your team who has that, right? So a strong leader uses their teammates in particular ways because they know they got those strengths, right? So a leader doesn't have to have every strength. The leader has to know how to use the strengths of their teams. The one thing people worry about is, are we going to keep the same culture as we grow, right? And my argument to everybody there is that I'll do my part, but it's up to everybody to do their part. And the only way to do that is understand what are the behaviors that we believe in, what's the culture that we want, and do we talk about it and move it forward enough? And are we living that culture so people believe in it? And I think it's become a big part of my job is to think and talk about that. And so, and how we get the best out of the organization so that everyone is, feeling fulfilled in what they're doing, that they understand that there's a mission here, and that they feel comfortable that their voice is heard. And I think the strength and the culture is this helps us get there.
Yeah, it's fascinating, right? When you think about, and this is one of the features that I think is part of the strength of the PTC Gallup relationship. But I think about the research integrity around the work that you all do and what we at Gallup strive to do, and the accountability to be empirically true, right? That those results have to stand up against the sunlight of statistical analysis and scrutiny. And I think a large part, Stu, when you were talking about that, strengths helps us make better decisions. Just better decisions. And I think it actually speaks to the qualitative component to that quantitative strength that both Gallup and PTC share. But now we're drawing in, the emotional clarity that we have about making the right decisions. And that supports so much of culture, right? When we think about how we feel about the place that we work and we're a part of. We all know this, but that's a large portion of what we decide to do and how well we decide to do it. So, but that academic rigor and the way we approach decision making, I think, has been really consistent in our partnership as we've extended that back and forth to each other.
And actually, that's a really good point. Is one of what you really when you're trying to help build leadership and strengthen the organization, you want everyone to believe in it. Right. And not everyone believes. And people often, especially in the science mode, people come in cynical to this stuff. Right. Mm-hmm. So the notion of having huge amounts of data behind the decision of what these are, to me, was helpful because I can go to people and say, this is not just a feel good how someone thinks it's going. It's based on lots of data.
Yeah.
And that was really important to us.
Yeah. Well, and we look at it time and time again, and just like you all review and again, scrutinize your own research and lots of levels of accountability. We do ours as well. And, I get excited about the fact that when we talk about culture and we talk about PTC and its brand that cascades not just, inside the culture of PTC, but even now external to PTC and on into different communities and different portions of the planet. I love the fact that your culture can back up a very strong, statistically supported claim that if you come and work at PTC, you will have a better career, but you will also have a better life. There will be an alignment there. We won't make you compete who you are inside PTC relative to who you are outside PTC. And I know one of the things that, as that culture really, speaks and attracts even more talent, is the fact that, we could go to a couple of research points and say, if we were primarily focused on our strengths, it increases our employee engagement by 6 times. If we're primarily focused on our strengths, this is where I get excited. It actually increases our self-reported quality of life. It triples the likelihood that we would say we're experiencing a high quality of life. And Stu, not to speak for you, but I know when I've spent time with you and the EC, your perspective goes, while PTC is really powerful in its contribution, there is that higher aspirational even desire to how do we create fulfilling and thriving lives for anybody who would work for our organization. So the reach is just so broad, but yet intentional about what we can actually do.
It's about, life isn't meant to be multifaceted, right?
Mm-hmm.
And, right, where you have balance is always a hard term, but you have different facets, right, that everyone has, and you sort of need, maybe not, there's a lot that goes into work and there's a lot that goes into family, but there's a lot that goes into other things that people do, and that in being engaged in all of them, and at work, let's face it, you spend a lot of your time at work. So if you're engaged in what you're doing, you're going to feel a whole lot more better doing the next thing and the next thing as well. So it's about trying to make it as a fulfilling sort of career as possible.
Yeah. Well, and the other thing that I think is as we keep connecting all of these dots, and Stu, you called this out earlier, but there wasn't a design, there wasn't an intent originally to find Clifton's strengths or to find these 34 strengths. It was really a very organic pursuit, similar to many of your own research efforts, where it was generated from questions and answers, and those revealed different questions and different answers. But if we take strengths back to its original launch pad, it was about studying successful people and then asking questions and finding answers in a way where, they seem like they have a strong sense of self-awareness, and they all speak to very consistent themes, these building blocks that seem to, over the course of time, provide a recurring pattern of success. And how do we wrap a language around it that would help them own, right, what those features represent and aim it with intentionality? And so when you think about PTC and your accelerated rate of success, strengths helps provide even more fuel to explain and predict more success. And so as you continue through your OKR process, you're actually studying success through those OKRs, thinking about strengths in the combination of the success, the arrival of those goals in a way that predicts even more. So the alignment and the consistency of even the research that brought us to strengths and the way you're integrating it and using it forward to actually create or reverse engineer the very future that you see it couldn't be more intact. So it's pretty remarkable the way it's all come together.
There were 34. Was there a larger number before when you started out? Or when it started out, how did it come across?
So Don was an educational psychologist at the University of Nebraska. In contemporary practice as a psychologist, when you're working with people, you look at their deficit. You look at the areas where they aren't doing well, and you try to focus on that and help them get better. Well, anecdotally, what he was finding was that if it improved at all, it wasn't very sustainable. And so it was a pretty profound shift, but he flipped the script. He said, why are we looking at weaknesses and fighting so hard for incremental gains that never last? Let's maybe take a look at the study of success and where are people, what can we learn from people who are successful? And so his progression and experience around the study and understanding of talent really took him to this developmental space where he was able to ask this inventory right, of talent that we now know as Clifton Strengths. But over the course of decades, he'd been studying it. He had accumulated, millions of questions across millions of different individuals before he finally was able to say, hey, here's our core data set, this population that we've studied. And he started off, he had identified 35 questions. So even at the start, he had it pretty well nailed down that there were 35, one went away, got rolled in with an existing strength. But here we are with 34, and these have been the 34 since around 1998, 1999. Stu, if you're comfortable with this, here's three. You and Don actually share three of the same top 5 strengths.
Oh, really?
And you do. And you're going to hear them come through, I think, for all of us who know you, for me knowing Don and just seeing how you all have grown such profound organizations. But Don, similar to you, Stu, he was a maximizer. He had futuristic, and he also had individualization. And you could just hear and see the evidence in who Gallup is now. You could see and hear the evidence in who PTC is and is still becoming. But the way that works to grow an authentic culture that never loses sight of the individual.
Well, there's something to a founder's sort of leadership that's different than when it transitions to a professional.
Mm-hmm.
If they don't have the same love of the concept, right? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That's the trick, right? How do you pass that on? It's right. It's like what they've done with you and your team and the people within it, right?
Exactly.
If you could pass that down and keep those same culture, that's when you become a great company.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, you know that better than anyone because you've done it. So no, but I thought that was a really interesting tie-in between the two of you.
We should stop there before anything else. Thanks for the award, and thanks for being really so helpful to me and to the company. And I really cherish the friendship as well.
That's terrific.
Thank you, guys.
Yeah. Thanks, Stuart. Congratulations.